Hello, my name is Matthew, and I read Jacques the Fatalist by Denise Diderot. Diderot is one of my favorite French writers, and Jacques the Fatalist is just a hoot. I love it. I read it again just for the sheer pleasure of it, and it's a satirical, experimental early novel set in the form of mostly a dialogue, loosely a dialogue between the master and Jacques the Fatalist. And they are just on their way. They're on horseback most of the time. Sometimes they're walking. And it's just them traveling down the road and having episodic mishaps, having interactions with other people, funeral processions or innkeepers, burglars and thieves and rogues, and all the while they're having a conversation. They're talking back and forth. But there's two other characters in this book, and it's the author or the narrator and the reader. And so at the very beginning, this is how the book starts. How had they met? By chance, like everybody else. What were their names? What's it to you? Where were they coming from? From their nearest place? Where were they going? Does anyone really know where they're going? What were they saying? The master wasn't saying anything, and Jacques was saying that his captain used to say that everything that happens to us here below, for good or ill, was written up there on high. And so Jacques the Fatalist is the servant, and then there's the master. And Jacques is this philosophical nitwit. It's the story of two nitwits having a conversation, and they're trying to have a conversation. The whole novel is all of the interruptions. The author interrupts, the reader interjects, and all of the stuff that happens, all of the rogues and thieves and counts and marquises and all these countless characters keep coming in, interrupting the story. And what I love about early novels, really early novels like the Satyricon or the Golden Ass by Apollonius, or Jacques the Fatalist, or Candide, or Don Quixote, or A Tale of a Tub by Jonathan Swift, and on and on and on. It's how experimental and inventive and unexpected the stories are. I tend to think it's because these stories are written at a time when there's no set standard model of what to expect when you pick up a novel. And so you can make stuff up. And it feels kind of wild and loose and dangerous, the way that the story plays out. Unexpected. So it's just so fun. Jacques the Fatalist, Jacques is trying to tell the master about the story of his love. It's one of the first things that comes up, is that Jacques has a past with his love. And the master is just saying, well, what's the story? And the author will even stop and say, I could just tell you right now, but then you're not going to have a story to read. I could string you along to the very end, and then maybe I may or may not tell you. And Jacques will even start telling the story about how he got shot in the knee, and then there were some villagers, and a peasant brings him back to his house where there's his wife, and the master will say, no, you didn't fall in love with the peasant's wife. And Jacques will go, well, no. He goes, what was it, the peasant's sister? And Jacques will go, no. Was it the peasant's daughter? Oh, no. And so you get this feeling that they're not very good storytellers to begin with. They're constantly telling these tales that feel like they're going nowhere. They run into a woman who, or Jacques is telling the story about how he had injured his knee and he's taken to this doctor. And he's out in the town square, and a woman drops her pot of oil, and he goes over and talks to her and takes his last coin, the last bit of change that he has, and gives her her money because she's destitute and she broke her pot and lost her oil. And the master goes, well, is this the story of your love? He goes, no, that's not it. And they don't just talk back and forth, but they argue and bicker. And it almost feels like these two are like in purgatory, because the author, Diderot, or the narrator, is very playing coy with really where are they coming from and where are they going. So major elements in a story that you would expect to find out, Diderot, or the narrator, is really not interested in telling you. What exactly is the relationship between the master and Jacques the Fatalist? How did they meet? Where are they going? And the reader, because the reader pops up in the book, is asking those sorts of questions. And the author is getting impatient with the reader and will say, if this was a novel, I would tell you, but you're not reading a novel. You're reading things that really happened. And so, yes, I could have the carriage fall in a ditch and everyone could die. I could have bandits come over and murder everybody, but that's not what happened. But also, there's such a chemistry between Jacques and the master. It's always really fun while they're talking, but they're not always together. Sometimes things will happen where Jacques has to go one way and the master has to go another way. And the author, the narrator in the book, is left at an impasse and will even talk to the reader and say, well, we can't follow them both. So do you want to go with the master? Do you want to go with Jacques? Jacques is the chatterbox. He's the one that just can't stop talking. We find out when he was a child, he had to wear a ball gag because his parents couldn't get him to just clam up his yap. And so we might follow the master for a while, and the author will go, well, this is getting kind of boring. Let's go back over to Jacques. And they'll meet up again. And also they'll fall asleep. The characters fall asleep, and you get this idea that the author is kind of vamping as if he's trying to fill in airtime. A television show at the very end, and you find out there's still 2 minutes left before commercials, and an anchorman or a TV host has to just start making stuff up. And they're constantly telling stories and interrupting themselves and not finishing stories, but starting new stories. And it feels like the tales of the Arabian Nights, or the roguish, ribald stories in the Decameron by Boccaccio, where you have just kind of clever framed short story collections. But this book is like that kind of short story collection on LSD, where it's all gone wild, a big stew of all of these stories competing for your attention. And so news stories just constantly get started. You'll be 20, 30, 50 pages in, 100 pages in, and someone might mention, well, what did happen to the captain? And you might think, like, yeah, there was a whole story that got started about a captain. What did happen with that? They finally they end up at this inn, and there's a hostess there, and the hostess is just as loquacious as Jacques the Fatalist. And the hostess likes to talk, which just aggravates Jacques to no end. He's now interrupting her, and the hostess is kind of getting into an argument with Jacques and the master, and finally the hostess starts telling a completely different story. And throughout this book, the kinds of stories that are told, they could be like idyllic stories, or pastoral, or romances, or chivalric stories of chivalry, or debaucherous, obscene stories. It's a whole array, dizzying the amount of stories that just get started up. But this hostess starts telling a story, and it takes up a fairly large portion, because it's a slim book. She's getting interrupted by the servants in the inn that keep coming up and asking about the laundry or the food service or the guests that are coming in, and she has to keep stopping her story. Jacques is interrupting her. She finally brings up 2 bottles of champagne, and now they're all getting drunk together. Jacques is just downing glass after glass of champagne, and the master is saying, "You're drinking too much." We come to find out towards the end, later on, the second half of the book, that Jacques is drinking wine all the time. So he's essentially a drunk character. And you'll be like reading the story that the hostess is telling, and the master and Jacques kind of look at each other, and maybe at a moment's pause will, within glances, kind of whisper, "This hostess is like a really good storyteller. The story that she's telling is great." And they're bad listeners. They'll interrupt her and say, "Well, what about you? What's your story?" In the middle of whatever she's trying to say, and she goes, "Well, hold on. I'm trying to finish. I'm just trying to finish one one story, which is so great." The author will. I remember the author, during the hostess's story that she's telling, and she's telling this romance, and there's scheming and plotting and things like that. The author stops and just says, "I forgot to tell you what everybody looks like." And we'll just have this moment where he says, "Well, this is what the master looks like. Here's a description of the master. Here's the description of Jacques. He's in his pajamas, wearing his nightcap, and here's the hostess." And okay, sorry about that. I forgot to say what everyone looks like. We can get back to the story now. And the common kind of dangling carrot is the story of Jacques' love. That's the most recurring story that's left unsatisfied, among other things. And it'll go back to that. After 100 pages, the master will go, "Well, what's going on with your love? You said that you have this love." And as soon as it'll get started again, the master will say, "Is this the love that you lost your virginity to?" And Jacques will go, "Well, no." And the master gets kind of grumpy, frowns, goes, "Well, I want to hear the story about how you lost your virginity." And then Jacques is bashful about this, and the master starts making up guesses. Was it a schoolgirl? Was it a girl that you met in church? Was it the pastor's daughter? And Jacques and the master constantly have this emotional roller coaster where they're the best of friends, or they're just at each other's throats yelling. He's like 2 old friends that can just bicker on into eternity. And Jacques goes like, you can guess day and night, and you'll never know the story of how I lost my virginity." And though just totally random at some point there'll be a throwaway line about Dante, the Divine Comedy, and the master, Jacques, will say, well, what's that about? And then you'll just start reading almost like a little book review. Well, this is what the Divine Comedy is about. He goes, well, that's not very funny. He goes, do you like pictures? And the master loves hearing stories. That's why he likes Jacques so much, because Jacques can't stop talking, and the master can't stop interrupting. And he goes, well, I like pictures and words. And Jacques starts mentioning like famous artists and famous paintings, and the master will say, well, describe it to me. And then you'll just get a description of a beautiful painting. And all the while, you do start getting some backstory of what Jacques' life was like in his past, and the captain and his loves, and all of his virginities. And the master, you hear his backstory. And as it goes along, you might start thinking, well, how does a thing like this start wrapping up? I think it has a wonderful way of ending. But the author is even talking to you about how the author mentions as well, this passage might remind you of Tristram Shandy by Lawrence Sterne. And the author goes, unless the story that you're reading right now actually predates Tristram Shandy. And if that's the case, then Lawrence Sterne is a plagiarist. Just wonderful. And throughout the whole thing, the one thing I feel like I haven't mentioned is the philosophy. There's ideas of good and evil, and of course, Jacques the Fatalist, so fate and free will, told by kind of these imbecilic, scatterbrained, unfocused, drunken characters. The whole book feels like a great night out at the most raucous dinner party. A whole table full of people having a great time. Everybody's talking. Everybody's telling stories. And it's so vibrant and kinetic that you're only catching the part of one story that somebody's telling you when someone else catches your ear. And throughout the night, you do get a sense of how everybody is doing. You get a sense of where everyone is in their lives, and even though you didn't catch every piece of every part of the story, you leave that dinner party feeling really satisfied and intoxicated. This is a book that intoxicates you. Diderot is one of my favorite French writers. I've only read a very small amount, everything I can find in English translation, but simply marvelous. So, Jacques the Fatalist by Denise Diderot. Let me know if you've read it. Leave a comment if you would like. And thank you for watching.